Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today's question is, can I analyze the case of Benard Grucha and Larry Wells? Just a reminder, I'm not diagnosing anybody in this video, only speculating about what could be happening in a situation like this. If you enjoy this video, please like it, subscribe to my channel, and consider supporting me on Patreon. I'll put the link to Patreon in the description for this video. First, I'll look at the background of this case, move to the timeline of the crime, then offer my analysis. Benard Grucha was born on March 23, 1975, and lived in the state of New York. He graduated from high school in 1993 and college in 1997. He earned a degree in criminalistics and criminal science. At some point, he married a woman named Heather. Benard worked in retail and started acquiring rental properties in the Buffalo area. In 2006, he bought a $450,000 house to live in with his wife. At some point, he purchased a Cadillac Escalade. Benard was hired by the retailer Toys R Us in 2007. He made about $90,000 a year. His wife Heather earned about $6,000 a year from an internet sales business. In 2008, Heather was diagnosed with breast cancer. Between the medical bills and perhaps poor spending habits, the couple ran up about $1.2 million in debt. They filed for bankruptcy in 2009. After this, Benard received a large amount of money from a relative who received a settlement in a lawsuit. He did not have to use this money to pay his bills because of the bankruptcy. Despite his good financial fortune, not everything was going well. Benard appeared to have some trouble in his marriage. The police visited his house on at least 3 occasions to investigate alleged domestic violence incidents. On June 8, 2013, Benard ran up the stairs to the master bedroom and fired a 9mm pistol through the back window of his house. Heather entered the bedroom and found Benard face down on the floor. She rolled him over and found that he was unharmed. He said, quote, "I wanted to see if you still loved me," unquote. Heather called the police at 9 a.m. After they arrived, Benard was arrested. He was charged with criminal possession of a weapon and harassment. Heather obtained an order of protection, and Benard was forced to move out of the house. Now moving to the background of Larry Wells. Larry was born on September 22, 1977, in Dunkirk, New York, which is about an hour southwest of Buffalo. After graduating high school in 1996, he went to college and studied elementary education. He graduated in 2000 with his bachelor's degree and earned a master's degree in 2004. This same year, he married a woman named Jill, and they lived in Blasdell, New York, which is about 12 minutes south of Buffalo. Larry worked for a couple of school districts before taking a job as an assistant manager at a Toys R Us store in nearby Hamburg, New York. Benard Grucha was the Toys R Us employee who hired Larry Wells. Now moving to the timeline of the crime. On June 29, 2013, 35-year-old Larry Wells arrived at the Toys R Us store in Hamburg at about 3:55 a.m. The plan was for Larry and a few other employees to unload a truck and to perform other tasks while the store was closed for business. At 4:08 a.m., Larry opened an exterior door in the back of the store to let a truck driver in. The truck driver exited at 4:30 a.m. 6 minutes before this, at 4:24 a.m., a camera pointed at the front doors of the store captured a mysterious intruder making entry. This man was the regional loss prevention manager for Toys R Us, Benard Grucha. He had a key to the building, but damaged the front door to make it look like he didn't. Benard was captured on video surveillance sneaking throughout the store. He was kind of crouching down a little bit as if he was trying to avoid being detected. He knew, perhaps better than anyone, that he was being captured on camera. Benard could be seen carrying a knife in his right hand as he was walking through the store. Benard made his way to Larry's office and entered it at 4:32 a.m. The video surveillance system stopped recording at 4:39 a.m. because Benard unplugged the DVR that recorded the output from the security cameras. Benard waited in Larry's office. At 4:53 a.m., an employee arrived at the store and contacted Larry by radio to let him in, which was the standard procedure for gaining entry when the store was closed. Not long after this, Larry made his way to his office. Benard, of course, was waiting there. The two men struggled, and Benard stabbed Larry 3 times. Larry was mortally wounded by a stab wound to his chest. During the fatal attack, Benard dropped his baseball cap on the floor of Larry's office. He left the store without being detected, but for some reason did not pick up the baseball cap first. Another store employee arrived at around 5 a.m. This employee also tried to contact Larry by radio, but did not receive a response. The employee walked around the building and found that the front door was open. He entered the store, clocked in, and started his workday. At this point, there were 5 employees in the store: Larry, 3 male employees, and 1 female employee. At about 5:45 a.m., an alarm activated in the store. One of the employees tried to contact Larry on the radio to turn the alarm off, but there was no response. The employee then asked the other workers to look for Larry. The female employee was closest to Larry's office, so she went there to look for him. When she entered his office, she found Larry mortally wounded in his chair. At 5:47 a.m., she called 911 and reported that Larry had been shot. Of course, in reality, he had been stabbed. The police arrived at the store and entered Larry's office. They found him slumped in his chair. He had a faint pulse and was taken to the hospital, but he did not survive. Investigators noticed that there was blood on his chair, the floor, and on the walls. The phone was off the hook. There was a baseball cap on the floor, and the digital video recorder for the security system had been unplugged. At this point, the police had no idea who committed the murder. They contacted Benard to help them recover whatever surveillance video may have been captured, because he was the loss prevention manager. Benard came to the store and showed the police the available video. The police were standing next to the killer as he helped them determine who was responsible for the murder. It was clear from the video that Larry must have been murdered sometime right before 5 a.m. The first obvious potential suspects were the employees who were in the store with Larry. The police had reasons to be suspicious of each of the 4 employees. The female employee had discovered Larry in his office. One employee arrived late for work. Another was not very cooperative. He was acting strangely and refused to answer questions. And the last employee was reportedly nervous and shifty while being questioned. Despite attracting suspicion initially, the police determined that none of the 4 employees had any involvement in the murder. They were going to need to look elsewhere to find Larry's killer. Benard had left his DNA on the baseball cap and on the power cord to the DVR. Again, he unplugged the DVR before committing the murder. Investigators collected and tested the DNA. The results revealed that the DNA from the baseball cap and from the DVR power cord were from the same person, but the police didn't know who the DNA belonged to. The DNA was not in the system. The police collected DNA samples from potential suspects, including employees of the store, but there were no matches. This was confusing because the police were confident that the killer must have had some inside knowledge about Toys R Us. It made sense that the killer would have been an employee. After going back through the details of the investigation, the police realized that they never collected DNA from Benard Grucha. They tried to, but he kept making excuses. On August 14, the police caught up with Benard and obtained a DNA sample. Once it was matched to the DNA found on the baseball cap and on the power cord, the police had all they needed. Benard was arrested on October 16, 2013, and charged with second-degree murder. The police searched Benard's house. In his garage, they found many items from Toys R Us, like electronics and games. Benard had been stealing merchandise and selling it on eBay. He admitted to stealing over $200,000 worth of merchandise from various Toys R Us stores. Benard was offered a plea bargain, which he accepted. He pleaded guilty to first-degree manslaughter. In August of 2014, he was sentenced to the maximum penalty for that crime, 25 years in prison. Benard Grucha will be eligible for parole in 2035 at the age of 60. Now moving to my analysis. Here are my thoughts on a few areas that stood out to me in this case. Item number 1. Benard told the police that his intent was to steal money from the safe at the Toys R Us store. He hid in Larry's office, and when Larry came in, Benard tried to get him to open the safe. He never intended to commit murder. It seems pretty clear that Benard was actually guilty of second-degree murder, despite being permitted to plead guilty to first-degree manslaughter. Even if he did not intend to kill Larry, the killing occurred during the commission of a felony. This is covered under the felony murder rule. The state of New York should not have offered a plea deal in this case. The case against Benard was extremely strong. They easily could have won at trial. Benard should not have been given any opportunity to get out of prison someday. Item number 2. Benard was in a position of authority at Toys R Us. The company wasn't particularly well managed and eventually went bankrupt. He could have continued stealing for years with only a minimal risk of getting caught. He had the keys to the stores, access to the surveillance systems. Why didn't he just keep stealing like he had been? Robbery is a lot riskier than what he had been doing. What motivated Benard to take such a drastic risk? Here are my thoughts on this. This is just a theory, my opinion. Benard was self-centered, grandiose, had a sense of entitlement, had difficulty resisting temptation, and believed he was special. During his time working for Toys R Us, Benard conducted surveillance on employees and customers. He was trying to catch people stealing. Benard thought very little of people who would take merchandise from the stores, not because they were stealing, rather because they were not very good at it. He believed that he was superior. He could be a better criminal than the people he was watching. He realized how easy it was to steal. In his mind, his phenomenal intellect, combined with his position of power and trust, afforded him an advantage that could not be overwhelmed. He would never get caught. When he thought about stealing, he was like a kid with a new toy. Benard started taking merchandise and selling it on eBay. Initially, he was satisfied with this tactic. He was making a lot of money, but eventually he started to believe that he deserved more. He became frustrated because he wasn't making money fast enough to satisfy his desire to live a life of luxury. Benard realized that it would be much more convenient to simply steal cash and cut out the labor-intensive selling of products on eBay part. He toyed with the idea for a while and came up with the robbery plan. He did not worry about consequences because he thought that getting caught was impossible. Benard knew the police would suspect it was an inside job, so he tried to act like a burglar. For example, he damaged the front door despite having a key. Benard was counting on the police chasing after this phantom burglar and never looking at him as a suspect. Benard's plan was to threaten Larry with a knife, get Larry to open the safe, and then take the money. When Larry started resisting, Benard panicked and stabbed him 3 times. He ran out of the store without taking his hat or the DVR. Benard was still confident that he could get away with the crime. He avoided the police for a while so they would not be able to collect his DNA, but eventually they caught up with him. Right before his arrest, Benard still believed in his superiority and thought he could get away with the murder. He said to the police, quote, "I know the cameras. I know the system. If I did this, there is no blank way I would have left all this evidence," unquote. Benard thought he was a master criminal, but he made all the same mistakes that most criminals make. Moving to the last item, number 3. This case illustrates how criminals rationalize taking tremendous risks. Often, they never consider the consequences at all. They have a vague sense of why it's important to avoid being arrested, but they don't actually believe it will happen. Their incredible abilities will shield them from that outcome. Benard was in a position of trust, but he didn't consider the severity of betraying his employer. He murdered a person that he hired. That didn't matter to him either. Benard was solely focused on his desires. In his high school yearbook, the caption under his photo read, quote, "You miss too much these days if you stop to think." Benard should not have listened to his own poor advice. I doubt he believes that 25 years in prison is all fun and games. Those are my thoughts in the case of Benard Grucha and Larry Wells. Please put any opinions and thoughts in the comment section. They always generate an interesting dialogue. As always, I hope you found my analysis of this topic to be informative. Thanks for watching.